All right. Welcome back to the Coach Steve Show. Let's welcome in Coach Tony Franklin of the Tony Franklin System, retired college, high school football coach. Coach, thank you for being here for my lonely little podcast. You're big time, so thanks for coming on.
Well, thank you, Steve. I spent most of my early life teaching middle school and high school history and political science and coaching all the sports. So, yeah, I appreciate you having me on.
What did you do like more, teaching middle school or teaching high school?
High school, yeah, middle school is the hardest thing I've ever done. I think the sixth grade, seventh grade, eighth grade boys, especially, are having such a hard time. Girls are flying by them, and it's very challenging. I would not want to go back and repeat that.
Yeah, I realized there was one point where, because we were talking before I went to EIU in Charleston, well, I was coaching at my high school. My head coach was let go, so I was trying to get my way into that school district. And the way in was, we'll go coach middle school basketball first. And I quickly realized I'm not meant to coach or be around middle school kids. I was like, I'm not the right person for this. I was too intense. And so then I always coached high school football, and I realized very quickly, like, I can only coach high school kids. That I have to coach young adults. They can handle what I say to them. They can handle these conversations. Middle school kids are, no.
Yeah, it's a different deal. But I always said that after coaching for 16 years in high school and middle school, and then going into college and having 1 year in arena football, the hardest job in the world is coaching in middle school and then high school. College is easy. I mean, I coached for many years and listened to, these guys bitch about how hard their job was. And I would tell them, I said, well, go teach 6 lesson plans and then have Johnny's mama come and chew you out because he didn't get enough playing time or he didn't throw enough touchdowns, and then have the superintendent call you in. And I said, y'all have no idea what real work is, coaching college football, especially at the Division I level, where you get paid well, and you just do football, you recruit. I mean, some guys would bitch about recruiting, and I said, recruiting's easy. You go get to meet young people, you meet their parents, you get to stay in a nice hotel, you get to get a rental car or jump in an airplane. I mean, what's hard about this? I don't understand it. But guys that had coached high school tended to not think that way. So I think that when I go and I look at some of the greatest coaches of all time, you go back and look, and they coached high school football. They've driven the yellow bus, as Chip Kelly talked about the other day. And I can remember driving the yellow bus, and I can remember going out and changing the water at midnight so that the field would be able to practice on the next day, and being in the field house with no air conditioning for 6 hours. And so, yeah, I have a deep appreciation for it.
Or like, maybe coaches don't know now, but when I was even as a high school player, we lined the field with the coaches. Like, you had to paint it yourself. Then where I'm at now, we have a game turf field and a practice turf field. So like, that's not a thing anymore.
Right.
But like, I remember being a high school player doing that. We got recrowned our field, but we had to aerate it ourselves. I'm on a 4-wheeler with the thing doing all that. You're, like you said, you have to take all the equipment there. You're driving the big, U-Haul type thing with your stuff, and you have to get them set up with equipment. You're handing it out. You're doing this. And don't get me started on fundraising, especially with COVID. Like, all the big budgets that were hit, like, don't get me started on money that you don't have to worry about. Some colleges do, like your smaller ones, but the big time, they don't.
Well, even there, the fundraising to me was probably the thing I dislike the most. I don't know anybody that enjoys it, and there's so many ways to do it, and to me they all stink. There was none of them that were in. And I listen to people. I talk to high school coaching buddies and stuff now about the new things that they do and how they do it and all that, and they still stink. It's not a lot of fun. Asking a booster for a couple of $1 million is a whole lot easier than asking your local five and dime for $20 after the soccer team has just gone by, the baseball team's just gone by, whoever else has gone by, and asked them for $20 as well.
Right. Or like, oh, what was your record last year? Oh, we're rebuilding the program. Well, I don't know if I want to do that. Or some schools don't even let you do certain things either. That's the next thing is,
Right.
uh, can we just put a logo on a t-shirt? No, I don't think we should. Or, this or that. And then, well, now there's sponsorships with high schools, at least in Illinois, it's starting. Like Adidas is on some stuff, Nike's on some stuff, BSN's getting on it big. BSN's trying to give people like $50,000. Like, hey, we'll give you 50 grand and we'll sponsor you.
Wow.
So there's just a lot, it's because of COVID and a lot of things happened. Huddle's trying to get on it. So there's some things moving. Um, I'm just going to ask this question because I was thinking of it. Because with your system, you work with high school coaches and everything. At least from our experiences, at least in Illinois, we're seeing less coaches out there, at least at the high school. Like we lost 4 or 5 coaches this year due to sections not coming back for teaching, so they had to let them go. One guy left to go be a defense coordinator, which was great. Another guy completely just wanted to stop. We just now filled our staff, and it took us since January.
Yeah, there's especially, I know that in the state of Texas, there's a gigantic shortage. Think of all the states, they pay coaches so well in the state of Texas, but there's a teaching shortage. And it's just, the thing that happened, I think that there were a lot of people during COVID that found out that they really truly weren't appreciated or respected because they were sending them in to risk their lives, not knowing, especially in the beginning, the first few months, of exactly what was going to happen. And because of my national exposure to coaches all over the country through my business, I mean, I heard horror story after horror story after horror story of coaches who's had kids that parents were dying, grandparents were dying, coaches on their staff were dying. And there was they were the last people that they thought of was the teacher and the coach. And so you can understand when you're in a profession that's difficult anyway, let alone even getting into school shootings and all the other issues that you have to deal with. So I can understand why since COVID, there's been a drop off in the number of people that are interested in volunteering, because so many high schools have to go with volunteers. And, somebody you're going to pay them $500 to come out and help you for the season to coach. And so they're strictly doing it because they love it. And then all of a sudden they find out that they're really not that appreciated. And so, they decide not to do it anymore.
Yeah, because like you said before, like parents come up to you and saying this, you're dealing with this. If an administrator says something to you, you're like, oh my gosh. And then like, I love coaching. I honestly think I was put here to coach. That's just my thing. But like this summer so far, like yesterday, I was at that high school for 12 hours because you do football lifts in the morning, you'll have a basketball camp, and then later on you have basketball games, and then you have to work another set of games because maybe freshmen play, maybe sophomores play. But you don't want to go home in between. You might have a 3-hour break with gas being $6. I'm not driving home. I'm going to stay there.
Right.
So I'm there for 12 hours. And teachers are at home that don't coach and they're at home. And so and then you're like, well, what do you get paid to coach in the summer? Well, maybe nothing. It depends on what kids show up.
Yeah.
And pay the fee. And then with COVID, you have parents still recovering and they're like, we can't afford it.
Right.
Well, we'll work something out. Don't worry. So then you lose that money to pay coaches.
Right.
So I think that's another thing is the summer. Like, do you want to give 4 hours to one sport a day and then you do another one and there's another 4 hours? Probably not.
Yeah, that was the thing, again, for me and transferring from high school to college is that people would always talk about, how long hours college coaches worked, et cetera, which is true. They do work long hours. But when I was a high school coach, I was at the weight room at 5:30 in the morning. I was opening it up for the people who couldn't come to the afternoon workout or they were playing another sport. And it might have only been 2 or 3 kids. Well, then I was going to teach class for 5 or 6 hours a day. Then I was coming back to practice and then taking kids home after practice and buying dinner for somebody and all the things that people don't understand. And the most money I ever made in the history of my high school coaching career was about $5,000 extra over my teaching salary. That was the most I ever made. And most years it was, like the first year I ever did it was like, I got $500 for football and I was the head baseball coach and that was $250. So I had a grand total of $750, for my coaching experiences. So, and I know that in some places it hasn't even changed that much. I mean, the stipends in some of the states are for a full-time teacher coach is sometimes less than a couple of $1,000s that they're getting for doing that. So yeah, I have tremendous admiration and respect for the people that have chosen that. Like you said, it's your calling, it's what you want to do. And I've always enjoyed it. People ask me, matter of fact, I was talking to somebody yesterday and they said, how much do you miss being out of it? And I said, I don't like the sport of football, coaching it. I don't miss it at all. What I miss is young people, because young people made me feel alive and they were appreciative, and watching them grow. That's, like you said, that was your calling. And for me, I had this ability to relate to young people and to, make a difference and stuff. So I missed that part of it.
Yeah, that's why I try to do all three. Like I was always a track coach. And then this year I couldn't do track, but a baseball coach reached out and said, hey, I was like, I played baseball. He goes, just be a freshman coach. You'll have a blast. And I had a blast.
Right.
Baseball is the most relaxed, at least for me. It was because football, we all know the stress of football and what's become. Basketball can be stressful because the whole game you're doing something. Right. Baseball, and I don't care who hears this. I'm like, if you call a timeout to go talk to the kids, there's really nothing I can do. Be like,
right.
How we feeling? You all right?
Yeah.
Like, it was just so relaxing. I don't think I got one gray hair from baseball. Then I go into the summer and I've popped a few more that are coming. But yeah, I enjoy it. But I was just wondering, because you have more national exposure. I talk to coaches too all over the country, but not as much as you. So I was like, but I talked to some Texas coaches, like you said. One coach told me, he goes, I'm afraid of the education system. And this was like 4 months ago. And less people are going to be teaching. Illinois is on the verge of teacher shortage. There's no aides, there's no substitutes. And every state is starting to see that. And then it just keeps getting worse. And then, like you said, the pay of coaching doesn't attract. Like where I grew up, your stipend was probably $2,000, which was cool.
Yeah.
Now where I'm at, your stipend might be $7,000-8,000, which is fantastic.
Right.
But then you're expected to do way more. They justify it as, well, then you got to do way more.
Right.
But it depends on your years too. And like you said, nobody wants to volunteer anymore. I did. I volunteered for 3 or 4 years.
Right.
But then it's paid out to where you're getting this. But some coaches we reached out to and we said, oh, you don't have any experience, so you may have to volunteer. They're like, nope, not doing it.
Right.
That's the other problem we run into. Because I have buddies calling me up here, like, do you know any coaches? I'm like, nope. Like, they either have a job or they're not going to move.
Right.
So I was just curious on that because I used to ask people, I don't even know if there's like a lot of O-line coaches anymore, because that's how I got my jobs were, oh, you've coached O-line before? Because I played it too. Oh, we're going to bring you in. And I said, like, can you not find O-line coaches? And they said, believe it or not, a lot of people don't want to, like in high school.
Yeah. And I tell every young coach that when they're getting into it, I don't care what you played in high school. I don't care what you played in college. If you played, I said, coach the offensive line, because until you do that, you never really truly understand football. And I was lucky in that one of my best mentors early on in 1981, I was starting my 3rd year of coaching. And he said, I'm going to hire you. And he goes, you're going to coach the O-line. I go, what? I said, I can't coach the offense. I said, I don't know anything. I've never done it. He goes, well, guess what? You better learn. And he said, you're never going to know football until you do it. And it was the greatest blessing I had, was him, making me do that. And I learned more doing that than I would have ever learned not doing it. And I've always then, as a college coach especially, had a great appreciation for what you have to do to help the offensive line as a play caller to make them successful. Because normally if you're picking a team and you're going, okay, everybody line up over here, the last guys left in the line are the offensive linemen.
Right.
The last guys picked. So now you're asking them to now go against the best guys, the guys playing defensive end or outside linebacker, the great athletes over there. And you're saying, okay, now we're going to block those guys. So you're going to give me your worst and go against their best. And that's why the breed of an offensive line coach, the characteristics of a great offensive line coach, to me, is one of the coolest things about sports, because it's a unique group of people.
Mhm.
It's almost cultish.
Yep.
There's their own language, and so many of them that I've come across don't really want to be a head coach, don't really want to be an offensive coordinator. They want to coach the offensive line, and that's what they want to do. And I found out that in hiring somebody, I think that's a characteristic that you want for the offensive line guys. A guy that, I really just want to coach my guys. I don't want to do any of that other stuff. Because I think those guys make better coaches.
Yeah, I had the opposite experience when I helped my high school out. He was like, "Oh, you're going to follow me around." I was always varsity. He's like, "You're going to be with varsity. You're helping me out." And he goes, "You played O-line, D-line. That's what you're doing." It's like, cool. Then when he got let go and I went to Charleston High School, the brand new head coach had got hired. I went up to him and I was like, "I want to coach." He goes, "What did you play? What have you coached?" Told him. He goes, "I'll let you know." Next day I see him because I'm at track practice. He goes, "Hey, I'm going to bring you on, but you're doing running backs and linebackers and you're calling the JV defense. You're going to help out the varsity defensive coordinator." And I said, "Why?" He goes, "You want to be a coach, right? You want to learn, right?" And I said, "Yeah." "Well, this is what you're doing." And I said, "But I don't want to do defense. I love offense. I don't like defense." And he goes, "Too bad." And I was I was young. I was probably 20 or something. I'm like, "No, I don't want to do this." But and I'll never forget it. And I'm like, "Okay, cool." And then what happened was somebody left and he goes, "Now you're going to work with the safeties or like the outside backer safety types." And I'm like, "Okay." And it just opened my mind up to like what defense does and how it works. And then the next year I become the offensive coordinator. He goes, "Now you're ready to do this." Made me offensive coordinator and I'm very young. And then I coach quarterbacks because I realized I need to branch out. So I coach quarterbacks. And then next year I went right back to O-line.
Right.
And then when we moved up to the suburbs, I knew nobody. It's a 3-hour drive. I know nobody. But what brought me back into it was, hey, you help out the O-line. Like you'll be the one school I went to, you're going to volunteer because I don't know you. You're going to be an assistant O-line coach. There was 2 of us. And that was the first time there was 2 O-line coaches. Never had that. Like I was the second one. That was a game changer. But I've never had 2 ever since that. I've been an O-line coach by myself.
Yeah.
And it makes it more frustrating when people say block. I'm trying to get them to block. I'm also by myself. So I'm trying to read the whole picture.
Right.
I'm trying to watch 5 guys do their thing. And I asked people and they're like, "That's true. I didn't think about there's no O-line coaches." Because I swear every place I reached out to, "Well, we need an O-line coach though. And we'll bring you on." And nobody wants to. And I said, "Okay, if that's my niche, if that's what I'm known for, that's what I'm going to do." And like you said, some guys I've worked around who are the offensive coordinator and I show them how simple you have to be for O-linemen. They go, "I've never thought of it that way." They're worried about, scoring points, throwing the ball, or like, "Oh, just run this run play." I'm like, but as long as we keep it simple and it's opened their mind up, and that's the first thought they go to. The first thing they do, "Steve, come here. We're going to do this run play. Let's make it simple for them. Screw everybody else." And it's beautiful.
Right.
To open that up. I was going to ask something else, but that also is a good point. When I was growing up, O-line coaches sometimes were the OCs, but they were coaching O-line as well. Then now it's like quarterback coaches are the OCs now.
Right.
It's like a full circle. And like you said, I've wanted to be a head coach, but the more I just coach O-line, the more I don't anymore.
Right.
That makes sense. Especially with all the BS I see head coaches put up with. I'm like, maybe not. Maybe I'll just keep to my 5 guys. Now you have your podcast out, which is great. I try to listen to it every so often. First of all, I love the intro. It's one of the best intros I've ever heard. I love it.
Appreciate it.
I'm not going to bring up your Auburn experience except for one thing that stuck with me. And there was one part where I think you said you went back to coach your guys and I laughed. You said Franklin's back, like you're going to be back to who you were. Because I had a similar experience to that. So I wanted to ask, was that the first time you felt uncomfortable and like I couldn't be who I was until that moment and say, "Screw it, I'm going back"?
Yeah. Well, I knew I was going to get fired because I knew that it wasn't working. I knew that I'd gone into a place alone where the assistant coaches didn't want to do, what my deal was. And 2 of them had been the coordinator before. The one other one wanted to be it. It was the worst. It was just stupid for me to even done it. But you're at Troy and you have a chance to go to Auburn. It's hard to turn that down. So I knew that my instincts told me that the only possibility of making this thing work in the middle of the season was for me to become me and to quit worrying about making the other people I worked with happy, to quit worrying about the feelings, to quit worrying about relationships, to quit worrying about all that other stuff, and just become the horse's ass that I could be. Not that I hadn't been at different times, but I was just like, I'm going to coach all 11 people. I'm going to get this done. And I never even got to the game because I got fired on Tuesday or Wednesday of that same week that I had that epiphany and I had that speech and all the other stuff. The cool thing is that the last practice that I coached was the best practice we ever had. And that was Tuberville gathering the team up at the end, saying that, and how much that this is what we needed, blah, blah, blah. Of course, you could take what he says and divide by 150 and maybe come up with the truth somewhere along the way in life, which is what makes him a politician. But I knew that I had reached the important part of the team. I knew that 95% of the guys were now okay. We're in. But I also knew that when I did it, I would have further offended the coaching staff, the people that weren't with me, the people that wanted to get rid of me. And within the community, everybody, Auburn's a strange place, as you know, even now with Harsin and every coach that's ever been there, it's one of the strangest places in the world. It's a great place because they care about football deeply, but it's also incredibly weird, the politics of it and how it all works. So, I just made that last chance desperation deal. I was happy with it. The fact that I got fired that week was a blessing, probably saved my life. I was dramatically overweight, huge amount of stress. And so it was probably the best thing ever happened. And from that, like the next few years were the greatest years of my career as a coach. And the number one offense in college football, one of the best offenses in the history of the game at Louisiana Tech. At Middle Tennessee, will win more games than they've ever won in the history of the school still to this day. As a Division I program, I get to go to Cal and coach the number one pick in the draft for 3 years. So, it was a great, sometimes I believe getting fired is the best thing that can happen to any coach because it makes you look at yourself in the mirror, learn, reflect. You can get bitter, which I was, but you can't stay bitter. You better get better. And that's what happened to me was I became a much better coach after that.
Yeah, I didn't have quite that experience, but like when we were talking about the guy that brought me on to be running back, linebackers, do this and that. Well, at one point he left the first day of practice, like 2 seasons later. First day of practice, he brought us in and he lived an hour away. Me and him have become close. I'm the only one to this day that knows the real reason why. We had a conversation, whatever. So they promoted the defensive coordinator to be head coach. He had his different visions. I stayed on staff because I was a young guy. I was an OC. I had that thought. I'm the OC. I'm young and blah, blah, blah. And I will say that there was 9 of us on staff. I was the only one not born and raised from that town.
Right.
So you can imagine what I hear of this. Well, we used to do it this way, or this is the way we've always done it. We lose a game and I go to Walmart, and guess who gets yelled at? I do. Not the head coach, but the guy that's the OC, not from that town. And then the last year there, I quickly realized I'm not myself because I realized he was the good cop all the time. He wanted to be buddy. He wanted to be their best friend.
Sure.
And they didn't respect him. And I said, no, like we need, like you said, we need a horse's ass in here. And I was like, I'll do it. Screw it. And I realized I don't mind being the bad cop. I can't do it all the time. Like sometimes I have to be the good cop. Well, I was always the bad cop.
Yeah.
Coach Steve walked in. No, like, what's he going to yell about now? What's he going to complain about now or whatever? And during my final season there, I quickly realized like I wasn't able to do what I wanted to do. If I brought something on offense, normally you have conversations about it. Like, okay, how does this fit into our playbook? How does this tweak work? How does this work? It would be, I show it to him 5 seconds later, 10 seconds later, he goes, but we're going to do this.
Yeah.
Okay. Or he asked my opinion on defense, and I told him to switch your defense. Don't run this defense no more. Switch it to this because of our players. Well, no, because I want to do this. It was that type of stuff. And it got to the point where me and him had a yelling match on the field. He said, "You're not calling the plays for the very last game of the year. I'm going to do it." And I said, "Cool, let's see what you got." And we lost 60-0. And I was like, was that the best decision? And I was never going to coach again. I made that decision. I resigned, never coaching again, moved to the suburbs, never coaching again. And then one day I just had the itch and I said, screw it, let's go for it. And like you said, I went to a school, revamped myself, and I was like, let's go back. Like, let's not, like, I hated football. I hated coaching. And so I was just curious about that situation because I was like, I had a similar-ish situation. And then that guy the next year takes over the offense. Someone sends me an article. He says something about me in it. And I was like, cool. And they go 0-9. And I'm like, not so easy being the OC, is it?
Yeah, the relation, I think that every time I've had a good experience, it's always been the same. It's always about the relationships that are on the coaching staff. It doesn't mean that you have to like each other. It doesn't mean you have to socialize with each other. It very simply means you have to respect each other. And if you have respect amongst the staff, it tends to work. It's when you don't have it that it tends to fall apart if things don't go well. If there's respect amongst the staff, you can hang together and you can not play the blame game. And, you know, I've always said this, the funny thing, like about the Auburn deal, I coached 7 games at Auburn. We were 5-2. We lost one game by 1 point, and we lost another game by 3 points. And it's hard to get fired at 5-2 when you're only a couple of losses are like that. And the coolest thing for me is that, and I tell, you know, I've said this on my podcast before, is that when guys, you know, you get fired, you know, people say, yeah, you know, I wish the best for the team. I didn't wish the best for them. I hope they lose every damn game. I mean, and I think 99% of the people that it happens to feel the same way. They just don't say it. And they did. They lost every game. And so, well, I take that back. They beat a 1AA University of Tennessee at Martin somewhere along the way. But the thing that all of those, wherever it's been, whatever the relationships have been, the greatest experiences of my coaching career in 40 years were always the same thing. It was a group of people that had a common goal, tried to do the right things, didn't necessarily like each other. I've been on places where there was lots of, you know, didn't like each other, but they damn well respected each other, and everybody did their job, and they all moved in the same force together, and then they got things done. And I think that's the thing that in looking for jobs, you know, for high school coaches that listen to your podcast, middle school coaches, et cetera, is that when you look for a place to go, you're looking for the next deal and all that. That's all you want. You want that and good players. Because if winning's important, like when a coach says, you know, man, I want to win. Well, sometimes to win, you have to leave. Because high school football, you may not ever win where you are if the players aren't good enough in the district that you compete in. It may never happen. So if winning is the most important thing, then sometimes you have to leave. You got to go where there's good players, at least average. You've got to be somewhere competitive, because you can be the greatest coach in you can put Bill Belichick at some schools and he's going to lose every game.
Right.
And then you can put the worst coach in the world at some school and he's going to win most every game because of the inequity of talent. So it's always unique, and trying to map out the career of doing this. And as a high school football coach, I changed jobs a lot, just like I did in college. And because to me, I always get bored. I get bored after a few years and I want something different. And I like fixing things. I like going where it was broken, but that there was a chance to fix it. You know, especially in college, it's so much easier to fix it because you can make 1 or 2 years of recruiting and you can fix something bad. In high school, the recruiting then becomes, you got to get the basketball guys out, the baseball guys out. You got to get the tennis player that's got a little cockiness about him. You got to get him to play. And the only way you get them to play, they got to have fun. They got to enjoy it. And that's what I would tell at my seminars. is that you better be a damn good recruiter today to coach high school sports because there's 7 million other things to do.
Mm-hmm.
You're just a complete ass all the time. And playing football isn't fun. That's why throwing the ball, the quote spread and all that stuff became such a big deal, is because kids like doing it. In other words, 8 guys touch the ball instead of 2. Well,
Right.
if I touch the ball all the time, that's a whole lot of fun for me, and I enjoy doing it. So you got to think of that when you're not at the elite place that still has history and heritage and everybody wants to play because you win state championships every year or whatever. Most places aren't like that.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, that's why a lot of us have gone to spread, because you try to think like exactly what you said.
Yeah.
This basketball kid wants to touch the football. How do you do that? Like, we were spread, and then this year I'm like, well, we're going to be spread, but how do we get kids the ball? I might have to motion and run some type of option out of it. How do I pitch them the ball and get them out and keep? And the thing is, once you get them, you got to keep them.
Yeah, and they're not gonna do it. It doesn't mean it can't be hard. Kids like challenges; they're fine with that. But
Right.
what it can't be is it can't be physically hurting them.
Mhm.
That's why as a practice, when you're coaching in high school football and you've got the numbers that you got, and it's the same in college. If you physically beat your guys up, because I've been places where, we're a badass on Tuesday and we're a badass on Wednesday. Saturday, we got nothing left because
Right.
we've given it all on Tuesday and Wednesday. The smart guys understand is that there's limits to what the human body can take, and they get the human body ready to where it can have a peak performance on a Saturday. And most bodies, I know, playing high school football where I ran the ball 20 to 30 times a game and played inside linebacker the entire game and was on every special team. My coaches understood in the 70s that if I had to practice and be physical, I could have never played because it took me till Thursday before I could even move, But those guys were smart enough in those days to figure it out. Well, hey, Tony's a good player. We better get him ready for Friday to do that. So I've always had that in my mind, is to do what you can do to get your guys ready to play, because the only thing that matters is Friday or Saturday, whatever day it is that you have the game. The rest of it is just being smart enough to get your guys in their peak performance state.
Right. Some of us get too locked up in the old school.
Yeah.
Because I did that when I was younger.
Yeah. And the tough, the toughness thing, I want my guys to be tough on Saturday.
Right.
Tough on Friday. Tough on in practice. Yeah. I mean, there's something to that, and something to understanding what it is, but there's also something to understand the human body can only take so much punishment.
Mm-hmm.
And today it's different than it was for me. There was no internet when I played. We didn't know about concussions.
Right.
I've had so many concussions that it's uncountable.
Right.
For, in today's world, I would have never practiced, for 2 weeks. I would have missed so many games. But today's kids know. They read, they study, they see stuff, and they're smart enough to go, dude, I can't do this. My body's not I want to be able to have children and play with my kids when I'm 35 or 40 or something like that. So,
yeah. Or they specialize in a sport. That's the other battle is I'm just a basketball player. I'm just a baseball player. I don't want to get hurt.
Yeah. So much of that comes from parents too, of thinking that, this is the way to do it. And now today you have to battle all these gurus. There's the hitting guru, there's the quarterback guru, there's the receiver footwork guru. There's all these. So they go to you to get coached for the game, but then they're going to pay somebody $200 on Sunday to go coach them up on how to throw the ball on Sunday when they just played on Friday. I mean, I'm all about business. I'm for people, to be good on business and all that stuff. I hate to tell you, my computer's about to die and I got to get ready for this next call I got.
That's okay. But Coach, I appreciate you. Where can people find your system again? Is it CoachTF.com?
CoachTF.com, yeah. And the podcast, the Coach Tony Franklin podcast. But Steve, thank you for what you do, man.
I appreciate you coming on, guys. Go check that out, and we will see you on the next episode.